And to Dr. Ken Wolf, all of our critical incidents, he's the one that handles them for us. Has now for 30 years, he reminds me, yours is 40 or, I don't know, he just complains about he's a volunteer, and remember that, he's a volunteer. But Ken goes wherever he's needed. He has a great crew and a great staff, and our Lifeline program, which has been successful and been around for probably 30 years, I guess, too, where you can call anonymously if you have a problem. It's right at 937-501-5015, I believe, right?
Whatever. Yeah,
whatever. So that's what Ken does for us. But this Frontline Strong program is headed up by the Wayne State University is at the hub of it. And I'm going to introduce you to Ken, and he's going to carry it from there. And I hope you'll pay attention to this Frontline Strong program. This is something that's going to be trend-setting, I think, nationwide, and we can be at the start of it. So, Ken, here you go.
Thank you very much. And you know, today is a very exciting rollout. We certainly saw the trauma from 9/11, and we're going to really take a look at what is the Frontline Strong program. The Frontline Strong program is a solution to a long-standing problem that's existed for law enforcement. In other words, in the aftermath of a line of duty, a critical incident, a personal trauma, where do you go for backup, right? You're on the street, you need backup, you know who to call. Either mutual aid or your department will send backup. And you know, we're going to talk today about a lot of things. One is, what is the soul of a law enforcement, a corrections officer, a dispatcher? And when Tim was talking, he was talking about how great evil was offset by great humanity. And you know, if you think about it, why'd you become a cop, a dispatcher, a corrections officer? You know, when I would interview people in the academy, I'd say, you know, why do you want to be a cop? Why do you want this job? And they say, I want to help people. I want to help humanity. I want to help my community. Some people may say, well, you know, I didn't get very high in school. You know, I can work in the jails, get 80 grand a year, get a lot of backup and overtime. Yeah, okay. But most people have a sense of commitment to service, a sense of commitment to their community. And you know, the nature of the job is not getting a paycheck. It's learning how to confront uncertainty, right? Every day you put on your leather, you go out to the street, you don't know what you're going to encounter. The firefighters, the police officers, the transit officers at 9/11, when they saw the towers, nobody dreamed it was going to come down with the devastation that it caused. And one of the things you know from backup is we're a band of brothers, we're a band of sisters. Do you know where that term came from? I was talking to Tig yesterday. It's a line that Shakespeare wrote in Henry V, okay? At that time, England was invading France, and the English had 2,000 troops, and they got to fight 10,000 of the French knights that had armor, cavalry, and all that. And the troops were demoralized. They were scared. So Henry, you know, through Shakespeare, mobilizes them, and he says, you know what? We're going to bond together. We're going to face uncertainty. Yes, there are bad odds, but we, band of brothers, will have each other's back. We'll go into combat with courage and training, and everybody will remember who we are. And that phrase became the movie phrase, Band of Brothers, the TV program. But it also applies to all of us because we are a band of brothers and sisters. We have backup. And that was the Battle of Argencorp in 1504, I believe. And it was, for those of you in military history, the English won. And do you know how it won? They won because it rained the night before when the French cavalry came. Their heavy armor and horses got stuck in the mud, And the English introduced a new kind of warfare, which were the longbow archers. So the archers unleashed a torrent of arrows, and they killed most of the French, and they won that battle through ingenuity, through courage, through innovation. And isn't that what we do when we go to every scene, when we have to manage uncertainty? When people went into ground zero, we had trust in one another, and we know we got your back. This program, in a very large, literal sense, has your back. The gentleman from Wayne State, they're going to talk about an array of services we never had. You know, for the last 25 years, you get a critical incident, you get somebody who's depressed, you know, we're all scounging around. Where can we get a clinician? Where can we get somebody who can go on site to reduce the impact of trauma after these events? This is the solution. This program fills that gap. And what you're going to hear today from the professionals at Wayne State, what we're going to talk about in terms of implementing programs statewide, is a message we want you to hear. We want you to go back to your respective departments, educate everybody, because we now have resources to solve and address problems that we didn't have before. So it's really a very, very exciting moment where we now have the resources to help all of us. And you know, the firefighters and another group whose name shall not be said are involved in it, but with 23,000 first responders. And this program has the funding, the strategic plan, and the resources to address these needs. So I'm going to turn it over to Wayne now, and they can start giving you some of the detail. And then we're going to go and meet some of your members who are ordinary people who had extraordinary events occur. And this is how we grow together and we got each other's back, not just tactically on the street, but emotionally through this program.
So my name is Ed Michelle. I am the Director of Community Psychiatry for the Department of Psychiatry and a former EMT out of Detroit. When we got this money from the state, it came to the university gave it to the Department of Psychiatry, and the team that we put together are either former first responders or have family that are first responders, and then they were required to go through training to understand, and it's ongoing training, to understand the culture of the first responder, and that included ride-alongs and meetings, you know, and presentations by firefighters and police. This program is designed to serve the police, the fire, the EMTs, dispatch, and corrections across the entire state of Michigan. It is a lot of people, and it's a big area, and it's a multi-year project. It's not like one little program, it's a multi-year project. But everything that we do, this isn't a Wayne State project, it's a first responder project. So everything that we're doing, the way we're designing this, is done with the input of the first responders. TIG, as an example, is on the steering committee. We meet with him every month. He's telling me what we should and shouldn't be doing. Tells me in between the meetings what we should and shouldn't be doing. And the point is that we recognize the fact, the state recognizes the fact, that it's not just the first responder that's impacted by the lives and the careers that you have. It's your spouses, it's your kids, it's your girlfriends, boyfriends. And so this program and this project is reaching out to all those individuals as well. It's training, it's education, it's treatment. It's put together with input from the first responders, from their spouses, from their kids, and we want to hear from them. We're also trying to knock down some of the problems or barriers that have existed in the past where you have professionals that say, oh yeah, I work with first responders, I'm a trauma expert. Really? What made you a trauma expert? So any of these professionals that we're putting together, this directory that we're putting together of professionals across the state of Michigan, they are going to be vetted by police and fire and first responders in the area that they're serving. If they can't be trusted, if they don't get it, if they don't receive the proper training, if they don't get involved with ride-alongs, they don't understand the culture, they can't be serving you. They can't be serving the spouses. We're expanding tremendously that peer program. And Ken's going to be talking about peer training through his critical incident stress management process. We're expanding and paying for that critical incident stress debriefing training that a number of you may have had and you can get in the future. That's being paid for by the state because they want to address the critical incident issues. But we also want to be addressing the 80% of the problems that first responders have as a result of the chronic, ongoing stress, anxiety, poor sleep, lousy diet, problems that result from that, things such as depression, anxiety, alcoholism, prescription drug abuse, marital problems, divorce, kids acting out. We want to, that's like 80% of the result of the jobs that you have as first responders. We need to address that. We're putting together a resource on a website that's going to be providing all kinds of vignettes and training and videos and links as something that any of you and your family members and even the kids can access 24/7, 365. There's going to be a 24/7, 365 call center that's exclusive to first responders. And again, this call center is being created with the assistance of first responders because call centers in the past, oh yeah, can I help you with something? And they're referring you to some place that's not designed to deal with first responders. And so the call center that's being created, it's confidential. They're not tracking a damn thing. We don't care where you're from, who you are, what department you're from. It's, we just want people to get in and get the help that they need. Dr. Arash Javenbach is up here with me. He is a literally world-renowned trauma expert because our department is very much focused on providing treatment in a multitude of areas that are not medication. We don't want to be writing scripts for everybody. Just oh, you've got depression here, take this. Oh, you got anxiety, take that. And so Dr. Javenbach has been the recipient of a $5 million federal grant because he's treating trauma in a non-medication manner. And so he's going to give a fast presentation on what he's doing. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is this. We need your input. We need input from your spouses because we want this material that's being presented to be functional. We want it to be realistic. We want it to be something that actually works for you. And so we have staff, that are working with first responders who are giving us day-to-day, real-life issues. We need to get names and numbers of spouses and even kids that are willing to do the same so we can put together education and training modules for them. Because ultimately, we'd also like to start a peer program for the spouses. And the last piece, again, is that if you know of any professionals that you've worked with in the past, social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, in your area that you think are good, reliable, and get it, then we really need those names and numbers as well, because those are the people that we want. So please give that contact information to TIG. If now or in the future, this program is not a one-shot. We expect it to go on for a number of years. Dr. Arash.
Hello, I'm Arash Javenbach. I'm a psychiatrist at Wayne State University. I run a stress, trauma, and anxiety research clinic at Wayne State Department of Psychiatry, which means all I do for a living is anxiety and trauma. I research anything from neurobiology to genetics of how trauma impacts people to advancing our treatment methods. I work in my clinic with victims of human trafficking, victims of torture, refugees, first responders, all different sorts of the ugliest things that people have experienced in life. And that's why I have some idea about what you guys are exposed to on a regular basis as you go on onto your work. I'm also involved in public education via media about anything that relates to my job. And as part of this, I have been, because over the past few years, I've been learning about the experiences of the first responders. Honestly, before this, I didn't know much about how tough and difficult and exhausting and at times frightening experiences of the first responders are. But as I accumulated that learning, I thought that it is important to also relay that message to the public, because a lot of public, as multiple cops have told me, when you pull over a car, for the driver, you're just an annoyance. For you, there could be a gun on the other side of the window. People don't know. So last year, during all the mess, I wrote this piece about the police trauma, and then which was basically telling the people what really happens to the cops in the daily life, and which was followed by the firefighters, because just to a lot of people, also firefighters are just these happy heroes who come and do the things and leave happily, because that's what they have seen in the movies or they have heard from their media, whatever they're exposed to, the realities of the tough experiences that first responders have. Because this is a unique occupation. I don't know what % of people every morning when they wake up, they don't know when they're called to a mission, what's the chance of someone dying at the moment. I mean, people, if you explain this job to people, they would think veterans. But the problem, the difference here with veterans is that a veteran goes to the combat zone and they fight, and when the combat is done, they're back in the civilian environment, which looks very different than the combat environment. For a cop who lives in a town, who goes to work in the morning in that town, in the afternoon in their civilian life, they're still at their work environment, which in the morning could be a risky, dangerous environment which required you to be on alert all the time. So it's hard to switch between these two situations. So going to a restaurant, I still have to sit with my back to the wall next to the exit. It's hard to be in the crowd because sometimes this brain has learned to always be screening for danger being in the environment. A lot of people who have gone through trauma find it difficult to go to their kids' baseball game. And a lot of times it's difficult to switch off the work brain. Switch it down to be, okay, now I'm a civilian and I can relax here and I just enjoy the life the way other people do. And basically this stress becomes cumulative and continuous and becomes part of the job, which at times can chew on the brain and on the body. And at the same time, well, there's a cumulative, continuous exposure to this. And I'm telling you guys the things you know. I'm just trying to say it with my own language. Cumulative exposure to things that can be really life-threatening. We were not, as humans, designed to be exposed to mutilated bodies or horrible scenes of domestic violence or, I don't know, rotting persons or being shot at or being at a shooting scene. Once it happens to me, I get super traumatized and I go back to my normal civilian life and therapy and treatments. But for first responders, for police officers, it keeps happening. And at the end of the dilemma here is that the job requires me to be a tough person and be in charge and be in a position of authority. But then at the end of the day, I'm a human. And this human body and brain reacts the way it reacts to this hard, tough situations. And what I found is that a lot of times the way we relate to these situations affects the way we are impacted by them. I've heard multiple times by people who were at the scene of an overdose of a young person who was the age of their own child. And that was the last straw. That was the thing that really, really hit them hard. And sometimes it's also even hard to even know that relation. Why something is making me nervous, why something is making me anxious at the moment. For instance, this is a text message I got from a SWAT team member who he was trying to lose weight and he was going on a treadmill, and every time his pulse rate went up, he would feel very anxious, near panicking, and we didn't know why. After some talking, we found out, well, number one, he was exposed to someone going through a heart arrest, doing a stress test. Number two, during those SWAT action missions, when you're in the heat of the danger and your whole body is in the fight and flight mode, heart rate is also up. So somehow this brain has associated higher heart rate to danger. So we had to work through those for this person to be able to continue on with his exercise plan. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this to mention how these things can really and gradually, slowly leak into different areas of a person's life. And then no need to present this data. Like PTSD has been something that has been talked for a long time. This fancy label that we put on people, at the end of the day, it's about nightmares, flashbacks, not being able to go to that area of the neighborhood or place where something happened, not being able to sleep, getting angry all the time. So, and with this comes depression, anxiety, alcohol use, all the things that we are able to address and we are able to help. And it's important, again, to know a lot of reactions that this body and brain have to what is happening to us is because it was designed to do this. For instance, if I came here to give this talk and I was worried that you may not like my talk, my heart could be pounding now in my chest, but that's very it's not helpful. If my heart is pounding, the only thing it does is it distracts me. But I always say to understand why the system is functioning this way, you have to look at this, the environment in which it was designed. 50,000 years ago, if I was in a group of humans and I was talking and they didn't like me, chances were high one of us would be dead in a matter of minutes. That's why this archaic animal system inside of me is reacting with this heart pounding and my mouth being dry when I'm giving a talk to a group because I'm nervous about it. So one of the things we do in this work is to basically talk about how body and brain react to stressful situations, to basically know what is normal and what is not normal. And then always anger is the other side of the fear, the other side of trauma, the other side of anxiety. And then our brain starts to gradually expand these experiences to other things that resemble it. For instance, if I hear this sound, it would make sense for me to cringe, but not this one. But when trauma happens, gradually that loud slamming door or the 4th of July firework will also create this startle response. A veteran with PTSD can drop on the floor when they hear a firecracker going on. Or the scene of an IED and a roadkill. It becomes difficult to understand and differentiate, and this animal body which learns through association. So we have a lot of videos to talk about these things. I'm just trying to say what is happening in our bodies and brains as humans, not as a police officer, not as a firefighter, not as the ER doctor. When we are exposed to these horrible, unseen before experiences that we are not made to experience, our body and our brain reacts to them in a similar way. Some of us might be more vulnerable, some could be less. Some is because of the trainees, some is because of whatever I've experienced, the way I was brought up, and some of it's our genetics, our biology. That's what I'm researching in my lab, wasting government money. And there are some barriers to getting this help. One is, as I mentioned, not knowing. Sitting here and being restless, constantly watching the door, I don't know if this is the part of being a police officer or is this being something that is affecting me negatively. Me not being able to sleep until 3 a.m. between the spouse and myself being angry at each other, is this part of because my job is stressful, or is there a way out of it? Where is the border between normal and between something that can be helped? And then the issue of the trust that Ed mentioned, and Ken will talk about. How can I trust a person who has spent all his life in this school and now sitting there as a psychologist or a counselor or a psychiatrist? They can't even understand your experiences. I didn't. Like 5, 6 years ago, if I saw firefighters, I saw police officers for the first time, and I didn't understand much. I still don't know much. I've heard a lot of stories, a ton of stories. I've done ride-alongs to understand more. But still, how can you trust this person, especially with very vulnerable stories, very vulnerable feelings and emotions? How can you open that? And the reason Ed said we are looking and trying to find people who know what they should know is this aspect. And then comes the sigma. Oh, if I admit I am having problems here, it means that for the rest of my life I'm damaged. And part of it is on us, because we say PTSD label on your head for the rest of your life. That's garbage. We can fix it. I had an officer, National Geographic came to do, I also work with refugees. They came to do a documentary on refugees, and I said, hey, you want people to relate to this? Let's also talk to traumatized kids in Detroit. Let's also talk to trauma, other aspects of trauma. And this officer who had gone through treatment came and talked, and he said something that I don't remember. He said, I had talked to multiple providers, and I was told I have PTSD and I have to live with it for the rest of my life. I met with this guy, and I didn't remember this scene, experience. And at the end of the scene, he said, we will fix it. And that was when I felt my feet coat. And I stood up and started fighting this thing, because these are labels we put on things. If there is difficulty sleeping, if there's difficulty with anxiety, if it's a low mood, all these things, we have a lot of tools in this century to help people get rid of. It's not a person's new identity. It's some annoyance that should be gone, because you deserve to live a happy, full life, because you just live once, as much as I know. And we can fix this. So, but if these conditions are not addressed, then not only they chew on the brain, they chew on the family life, they chew on my professional life. We have evidence from research. Hypertension, high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, all those things that come later years, inflammation in the body, pain, high cholesterol, all of those things will come with it. And the ways we help to reduce the impact, we are not just pill guys to throw away pills. Of course, I'm a psychiatrist. There are pills that are needed at times which can help. But we focus on a person as a human. Diet, lifestyle, social life, exercise. I have a couple of pieces if you wanted to learn more about our style on the media, about how we make it the way the person, like basically use it to help the person live the way this body and brain was evolved to live. And also how to use exercise. I promise I didn't choose that picture. The editor chose that picture for this article. But here is an article about how exercise really can change the brain, how workout, and how fit it into a crazy busy job of yours and mine, and how to find the way to do it. Very quickly, a few other things. There are other ways we help. Peer support was talked about and will be talked. Therapy, parsing out what happened. What is the story? What was the problem? And overcoming some of these emotions that as humans come out of with traumatic hard experiences. Shame, guilt, we all are familiar with those feelings. I don't have to get deeper. Why this incident hit me? Why this one time when I saw a young teenager overdose hit me so hard compared to all the other things I had seen? How can we change the meaning of the experience I've had? I don't know, there was a shooting and I've been feeling I did the wrong thing or the right thing. Ways of looking at these meanings we have created for the events. And then all of these really change the brain. We have, again, evidence. Well, I don't want to sound like a nerd, but we have science evidence for that. And of course, exposure, basically gradually exposing people to the normal life situations that they're avoiding because of whatever happened, whenever it happened. The example was the guy that we were talking about. So we decided, okay, let's go 5 by 5 beats per minute of heartbeat. So he would get on the treadmill, stay on that, get a little bit anxious, let the anxiety settle in, become comfortable with that level. 5 times later, go up 5 more, 5 more, 5 more, and then he sent me this picture that was like his achievement. In our lab, one of the other things we are working on is use of advanced technologies, mixed reality. So basically, Iron Man. You wear the goggles and you see your real life environment, then there are 3 people sitting here, which are not real. And we have been using this to basically create those exposure scenarios for people to feel more comfortable. And I want to just quickly play a little video of don't get super excited. This is the very beginning, but it's okay.
I'll turn down the volume.
Okay, and it's playing. And basically, we started with very simple layers of having people using it for fear of spiders. You wear the goggles, the spider, a virtual spider is crawling on the wall and on the ceiling of the room. And I see on my computer where you are at, where you're looking at, and I drag the spider and put it there and tell it what to do. This is what I see and how we do the exposure scenarios. Don't get bored, because then I'll tell you where we are going with this. We did a clinical trial for people who were afraid of spiders, and everybody in less than 1 hour was able to touch a real live big fat tarantula that you will see in a moment. This is Tony Stark. This is our tarantula in the lab, and this person was terrified of Tony an hour before this treatment. So to go a little bit faster, we are adding some other objects. Let's say we are adding dogs. We are adding, for people who are afraid of dogs, adding snakes, and adding gradually, you can imagine we could go towards humans encounter scenarios. So right now what we are working on as the part of the Frontline Strong project is creating crowd scenarios, because a lot of first responders with trauma don't like to be around crowds. So you wear the goggles, you're standing in this room, 2 people start talking here very quietly, then gradually more people come. We are also working on face mapping to basically put the faces that we need on these avatars. And then another group of people comes, and there will be a crowded, busy party, and people will get loud, and gradually, you will have a fireworks going back in the background, and all full-blown party, or a restaurant scene, or a supermarket scene. This is all in augmented reality. And we are using also some of these technology on phone apps. So that's part of, or a terrible CPR scene annoys a lot of people, right? And I've had people with PTSD. So we also have those. You wear the goggles. There's a firefighter, a cop, and an EMS personnel sitting there. They're working on a CPR. We can choose the age and situation of whoever is being rescued, and at the end, it could have a terrible outcome. But it's not making you to suffer again. It's just helping the person with the help of a therapist to feel more comfortable, not be always having flashbacks and nightmares about those experiences. And of course, you can imagine such technology in future can be used in training. Imagine you're in a training building or center, you're wearing your goggles and you're fully geared up, and the trainer basically throws at you an encounter with a person of any kind or background or mental situation who has a problem that you have to solve. And this training is more interactive because it's augmented reality. You see everything else. You're walking around. You can pull your gun. So we are very excited about this technology. It's just the beginning. And we could definitely use help from you guys to have these things be more realistic and more useful. Because other than that, if it's not, it doesn't end up being useful for you guys. We're wasting our time and people's money. Thank you so much for having me.
To 35 hours to get medicated, to get assistance. Also, we have a commitment to confidentiality. You know, one of the deputies I was talking to, he says, you know, Doc, I survived by not trusting anybody. Am I going to call some doc somewhere I don't know? And the answer with this program, this is independent of your department. If you get help with some of the Wayne State docs, it is confidential, and we're working to save your job, to keep you functional, not take you out. And that's very, very important. And we now have resources statewide that we never had before. So if you call TIG, if you call some of the other members, POAM, and said, I got an officer, a family member, a dispatcher, who's in acute need of being seen now, we can facilitate that in a way of working with Ed in a way we never had these resources before. And I recognize we're giving you like a real overview of this, and I'm sure we're going to get you some more detailed stuff as we go through it. And you know, this program is to help the backers. We are a team. think of it as a SWAT team. Got a high cover, low cover, guy in the front, guy in the back. We're here emotionally to help you and your families get through trauma, get through pain in a confidential way with professional resources that we never had before. And you know, what is law enforcement? It's human suffering. What do? You see pain. You see, people don't call you because something's good. You know, negative public image, death, pain, upsetting events, scrutiny. You have to develop emotional calluses to go to the jail every day, to go to work every day, to hear some of the calls you get every day. Otherwise, you might get overwhelmed vicariously with the pain. And you know, we call that vicarious trauma. You see pain every day. Is it going to affect me? And most of you have a sense of commitment to help others. But you're caring for others. If you see so much pain, could it overwhelm you? We call that compassion fatigue. We talk about critical incident stress, which we're going to go into. And you're going to hear from your members, some of whom are in this room, about how they had critical incidents and how they navigated through it. Dr. Arash was talking about PTSD and burnout. And you know what? What is the effect of chronic exposure to misery, to harm, to evil? The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. We know you're going to get wet, but most of you can dry yourself off. But sometimes it may feel that the water may be drowning to you, and we are your backup to help you confront, label, identify, and cope, and grow through these events. As Tim Brown was talking about, ordinary people who are extraordinary heroes. You know, a hero can be, somebody who does something, great, the Olympics. What about the hero who gets up every morning, puts on the leather, goes to the jail, goes to the department, goes on the street, and you face uncertainty? And, you depend upon your training, you depend upon your skills, and you always resort to your basic training. But what happens when an event can overwhelm you? People will personalize a certain event, as you're going to hear from your members today. That isn't a big explosion. It's not the big one. It's the little thing that touched their soul, that they identified with the victim or the pain. And that's what we need to understand. And we're going to meet with Kim White. Tim, do you want to come up? Where'd he go? Ran away. Okay. Kim is one of the dispatchers, and she talks about some of the issues of a worldview, how dispatchers are affected by the cumulative horror they hear every day on the phone.
Dispatchers do internalize the calls that they take, whether it's a violent crime or a senseless crime. I do think they internalize that. I think it changes the way that they view their peers, the way they view the other members of the community, the way they view the world in general. Some people call it cynicism. I don't necessarily call it being a cynic, that you see all of these things, and it does color the way you look at the world. And understanding that from just a dispatch point of view, we're all in that boat together. It does change the way that we do things, whether it's the things that we ask our children information-wise, the places that we go. You typically see most police officers won't sit with their back to the door in a restaurant. They need to be able to find that exit, see who's coming in. It does change your outlook on the world.
We did a study of 125 dispatchers, and in this very large city, the civilian dispatchers got a 25% pay increase over the normal civilian employees. They had the highest turnover and the highest resignation of all the employees in that city. And when we interviewed people, what we found was the dispatchers were internalizing every rape, every domestic violence, every mugging, every shooting, and in their minds, some of them just started reliving it again and again, and it became too traumatic to listen to all this, and they figured, I'd rather do something else than to be vicariously traumatized by everything I hear every day. Do you want to chat with?
Yeah, when we were watching this yesterday, I was reminded, I've known Kim for at least 20 years, I think. Worked in a department, new dispatchers, we represent dispatchers, and in that few minutes that I saw her in this thing, I learned so much about what dispatchers do. I hope that maybe some of you might as well, but the questions she was asking, like, you know, I didn't see the video that you were showing on here before I walked in, but, you know, is your dad a hunter? Does this go on? All these questions that, as we're arriving at the scene or approaching the scene, I would never have thought that those questions got asked until I watched this. So I was really impressed. And also, is this where she makes the comment about how it changes lives?
Yeah, right.
Where she talks about, you know, what she does might have, one of the parents might get arrested, and it could actually change somebody's life. And I never thought about it like that. I was really impressed with it. And like I said, I've known her, I've talked to her a million times, but I never heard that story. And I thought it would be helpful to all of you.
You know, we're really confronting the issue of who are we? Who are you? How do you define yourself? How do you define your mission? How do you define your job? You know, how many of you, when you go to a party, when somebody says, what do you do? Well, I'm a garbage man. You don't want to say you're a police officer because people are going to come up, you know, that guy gave me a ticket, and, you know, how did you do that? And why do you do that? And a lot of people like a cloak of anonymity rather than share. And we've seen a lot of negative public image of what we do. But you know, these people aren't on the street when they got to deal with somebody who at any minute may turn and harm them. We spoke about the Band of Brothers and the law enforcement personality, you highly motivated people, action-oriented, risk-takers, who in their right mind would do what half of you do every day. You need to be in control. Perfectionistic. You see things in black, white, good or bad. But you know what? You go to a scene, you got to make an assessment of what's going on. Is there a weapon? Is there a threat of homicide, suicide? Is somebody going to get hurt? And unless you answer those questions and you look at tactics and distance, you got to make a decision of how you're going to handle that run so you and the people there can be safe. And you don't have all day to do interviews. You got to look at your gut, your training, and the level of risk that your situational awareness shares with you. And there's a self-reliance. You have to have confidence, and there's little acceptance for fallibility. You know, you guess wrong at a scene, you can get shot, or somebody can get shot. And shame, for us, is a worse emotion than fear. We don't want to look humiliated. We don't want to look like we can't have the mettle, the strength, the courage to confront the streets, to confront the inmates every day. So we build up this armada of how tough we are. And with our all or nothing value system, if an officer feels overwhelmed, or as Dr. Arash and Ed were talking about, depressed or vulnerable, and they can't suck it up, it may reinforce an image of a self-loser, and I don't want to tell anybody about it. So what do? We got our stress masks, right? We got that look when we're in the jails, when we're on the street, when we're interacting with a lot of people. And you know, can you tell what we're feeling? You know, happy, depressed, sad, angry, pensive, excited, suicidal. We don't want somebody to get under our skin, because in the jails, one guy says, well, if somebody's nice to me, they're trying to manipulate me. I wonder what's going on in the third cell block. Or, you know, people lie to me all day long, and I don't want to show any emotion because I don't want to be manipulated on a scene. So we have this code of silence. We don't talk about things. We don't want to be vulnerable. And the stigma paradox is I will not be allowed to save lives if I ask for help to save mine. And we don't want command to doubt us. We don't want our peers to say, you know what, this guy is feeling weak, he's feeling upset, you know, what are we going to do? So we need to keep a big front, strong, show how tough we are, lack of trust of command or management. If I go to them, is that going to hurt my promotability? Is that going to hurt my reputation? Is my partner going to doubt me on the street? And we don't want to show chinks in our armor. And we have a scholar and a statesman talking about chinks.
There are other things that create stress on this job, and I think it's the concern for openness or the reluctance to be open that creates that stress. And this will help to mitigate that some. You know, a chink in the armor is a weak spot. You know, that's just by my interpretation. And because of that, somebody who feels like they complained about something or had a bad day, and it might be their parent died, it could be, believe it or not, it could be their dog dies. That might be the worst day for some guys. And because they showed this moment of weakness, they get involved in a serious incident somewhere down the road, maybe take a life or save a life, and they feel a little weak, and somebody says, well, I remember when his dog died. He had that same expression. I mean, he's got this weak spot. It shows this chink in the armor, if you will, that really doesn't exist. But because two separate incidents with a similar outcome happen, it means there's a trend. It means there's a pattern. And because of that, we just choose not to tell you even about our dog. I think this program will go a long ways towards allowing people to have less fear of being honest, and it may be because the person they talk to is of like mind, another officer perhaps, but it might be someone that they don't see every day. So they feel like they can talk to this other officer in a way that they wanted to talk to an officer they see every day, but without the consequences of it being repeated or the fear of it being repeated.
Want to add to that? No. Okay. Our fearless leader, right? One of the messages we want to get across is that you're a human being first, a corrections officer, a police officer, a dispatcher second. And if you go to a scene and if your humanity shows through, it doesn't mean you're weak. It shows you have human feelings, which is the essence of all of us. And as you listen to some of your peers talking about their humanity, it takes strength to self-disclose. It takes strength to acknowledge, you know what, this one got to me. But then it takes courage to work your way through it and work with some of your peers. This was an officer who was involved in a suicide by cop, and he talks about after the aftermath. We're going to hear about the incident, but there's no shame in getting help.
It wasn't until later, actually several years later, that I began to have some trouble. After a critical incident, the only thing I can say is don't be afraid to ask for some help. You know, we look like we're big, strong supermen, superwomen. You know, we have to put on this big facade, but we all have different emotions. We all deal with things differently, and I can tell you that the help I asked for and received made a huge difference in my life.
Stress. And I think Dr. Arash was talking about stress, and you know, that's going to affect all of us. And I got to do one thing here. Oh gosh. And sometimes we can reach a breaking point. When Jim and I were talking about it, I asked him for some paper clips yesterday, and he told me I had to inventory them. So just an acknowledgement. Stress can make you strong, it can make you weak. You take a paper clip, right? And what happens is, if you keep on bending it forward and backward, it's strong. But look, it broke. Stress can break you under certain circumstances, and that's natural and normal because nobody can manage everything all the time. What's important for you and everybody you work with and you represent, when we see stress building up and people are getting near a breaking point, you want to know about this program and refer it to them. And you know, usually there's the fight, flight, freeze reaction. On the streets, if something's going down, you can't freeze for more than a millisecond. So that's why you try and relate to your basic training. But sometimes in the aftermath of an event, it may get to you. And they talked about cumulative stress, you know, the substance abuse, work-life problems. And we're going to talk about acute and traumatic stress, because one of the things we're doing in this program is we're going to help all the departments in the state set up CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management programs, for those of you who are interested, and we'll talk about that in a letter in a little while. So depression, suicidal thinking, self-doubt, burnout, issues with management. And these chronic stresses can add up, and you know, once in a while they can overwhelm you too. So it's important to recognize them early. And we see this officer, rescue, peer support, but I'm not drowning yet, and there's substance abuse, depression, suicide, and divorce. And Kim, again, talks about why we're training. We put $100,000 into this budget to train peers throughout the state so your department can get peer support, and we're going to coordinate the peer support program.
That I do believe having a peer team is incredibly beneficial to police officers and dispatchers, to have that extended knowledge of your reactions, the things that you can do for those reactions, that knowledge, that support from somebody who's thinking like you, feeling like you, to understand that you're not alone.
That is a critical phrase. You are not alone. You now have resources. You got POAM, you got Wayne, you got us, because our responsibility in this program is to set up the peer training program statewide and to help you in your respective departments develop programs so you can institutionalize a process of help on an ongoing basis. You know, a lot of times you talk to some of the, well, we got one peer here and we got two peers there, but you don't have a system. So if somebody retires, somebody gets promoted, somebody doesn't want to do it, there goes your whole peer program. This grant has given us the resources to institutionalize a whole process. And we're talking about critical incidents, you know, certainly the chronic stresses, but we're talking about critical incident stress. That's an event outside of the range of normal human experience that would be distressing to almost anybody. It would be overwhelming. It deals with a life-threatening situation. You know, it's not like if somebody sprains their ankle in the parking lot. And it's sudden, unexpected, it upsets your sense of control. And we live by control. We go to a scene. We got to take control, right? Well, sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes there are unknowns we didn't anticipate or resources that we didn't have. And it shatters our assumptions about how the world works. We're the good guys. We're the good ladies. Why are bad things happening to us? Confronting evil with your humanity. And it would be distressing. These are reactions after critical incident shootings, and we're going to go through them, that police officers have. It's from LAPD data. After a critical incident, 58% of the personnel experienced a high sense of danger. There was a lot of anger. There was blaming. You know, who put me in this situation? And there's you know, an anger for, they're a different person now after the critical incident than they were before the critical incident, and they haven't processed it yet. They have nightmares, they withdraw, anxiety, fear of future, sleep difficulties. They see slideshows of the event. They see slideshows of the shooting, of the crash, of the burning. And they don't know, when are these slideshows going to end? Emotional numbing. I'm going to, you know, drink. I'm going to shut myself off. I'm not going to feel. Alienation. Nobody understands me. Guilt, sorrow, or remorse. I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Why didn't I turn left instead of right? I could have got that scene before my partner got hurt. And you know, we don't have a playbook for every kind of natural event. You know, you look at the disasters right now in Louisiana. You look at, you know, ground zero. We can't anticipate. We hope that our training and our backup will help us get through it. Problems with the system, family problems, alcohol, the fear of losing my mind. If you never had flashbacks, if you never had the slideshow, and all of a sudden you can't get it out of your head, you're watching the ball game, and there's the shooting, and there's the scene, am I going crazy? No, this is the cause of a critical incident and critical incident stress. And people often experience losses. Loss of a sense of immortality and invulnerability. When I saw my partner get shot, when I got shot, I had to confront, I could be dead right now. What would happen to my kids? Who's going to take care of my family? And you look at your mortality because it's real. It's not something you saw on TV. It's not something you read about, because you recognize that that job, that day, that incident could have almost killed me. And now you start thinking about it, and now it can be unsettling, because we can't have unsettling thoughts when we go back to the street again. It'll distract us, it'll make us hesitate. We can't be living that event with the new scene, because that'll put me or my partner in harm's way. We lose our sense of safety and security. I don't feel safe anymore. I know what can happen in the jail now. You know, what happened to so-and-so, what if it happens to me? A sense of trust. Who can you trust? You know, when bad things happen, what's going on in the community, one's identity. Do I want to put my leather on again? Do I want to go back to the jail? Do I want to continue this job? I always saw myself in this helping, caring role, but if it's going to kill me, if it's going to destroy my family, maybe I got to rethink what I'm doing. And it changes our sense of meaning. What is our purpose? Because when we confront evil, when we confront harm, pain, real suffering, and death, we got to figure out, what's life all about? What are our priorities? And this program, with the critical incident support, with the resources we can make available, can help guide departments and teams and people through these kinds of events. This ain't the movies, and you ain't Wonder Woman, you ain't a superhero, you ain't Rambo. You're a human being, and these events can get to you. And it's important to, these people have scripts, right? You don't. And if we have a near miss, if we screw up, or if we are traumatized by an event, that's part of the game. That's part of a critical incident. So when we have to think about, what the heck just happened? Who are me? Look at the pain. Look at that dead kid I couldn't save. You know, we stare into space and search for meaning. And the meaning was often our commitment that we gave to our community. We are doing good. 343 firefighters went into the building. 37 transit officers went into the building. And they were on a mission to save lives. When most people are running in the other way, you're running to the scene. So let's look at the critical incidents that this program is addressing in a systematic, comprehensive way. A violent death of an officer, shooting someone, being shot at, suicide of a fellow officer. And you know, here, lost another one, better do that. You know, the suicide rate for first responders is 27 per 100,000. For civilians, it's 9. We're killing ourselves much more than the bad guys are killing us. We got to stop that. We got to intervene when we see people in distress. It's not mind your own business. No, you're saving lives. You want to save lives in the community? Save lives in your department. Approach people. And that's one of the purposes of the peers we're going to be training. You know, John and Salisbury are here today. They're going to talk about an officer suicide.
Several years ago, this incident was absolutely shocking to everybody involved. There's a lot of confusion. Everyone had their own different way of processing it, and there was no uniform way to really understand how to cope with what was going on. The age-old question of why did this occur will always be there, and I don't believe we'll ever have an answer as to why. But one of the things that we felt we needed to do was to really care for one another and really understand how it affected everybody in a different way. After the murder-suicide had occurred, one of the things that we did at our local level, our local union leadership contacted POAM. We requested to deploy POAM's Lifeline. When I first made the call to POAM Lifeline, I didn't know what to expect. This was way out of our league. This was something we had never dealt with before. There's no real way to really prepare for this, and we were doing everything that we can to reach out to make sure we were doing what we can for our members and learning in the process. I remember speaking to the police psychologist and contacting the crisis team, and we developed a really valuable plan to set up a debriefing and a meeting with several members who knew this individual and several members who were peripherally affected by this, and we set up a very good program to help cope with the incident and help understand the effects that everyone was feeling internally, and how everyone was decompressing and how everyone was processing the event. When this event occurred, I remembered vast amounts of emotions all across the workforce, all across our membership. People were mad, people were angry, people were shocked, frustrated, all the words that you could think of. But one that really stood out and that was very fitting for the event, for being a murder-suicide, was betrayal. I remember talking to several people who felt absolute betrayal because this isn't who we are as a profession. Clearly, this member was dealing with some deep, dark demons that none of us knew, and it's really easy for us to all say, wish we could have seen that. But at the end of the day, what ultimately wound up happening was just a horrendous, heinous act that none of us can accept and feel any sorrow for.
In just a few minutes, I'm going to ask John and Officer Salisbury to come up and talk about other aspects of that scene. But other critical incidents, responding to multiple fatalities, you know, infant mortality. Sergeant Rice talks about a child's death and how it affected him.
I had just become a father. My son was born, was a premature baby, and he lived in the NICU for approximately a month. During that month, I was going every day, hours, you know, we were there. And while we were there, in the bassinet next to him was a baby with a very unique name. We responded to a call. I was sitting in roll call with my partner, and they said that there was a baby not breathing. We responded the quickest way. We got there, and when we ran into the house, there was an officer attempting to do CPR, and I was giving rescue breaths to the baby when I heard the screaming of the mother saying the name of what was the name of the child that was in the bassinet next to my son in the NICU. And I glanced over between breaths, and sure enough, that was the baby that was in the bassinet next to my son. We proceeded to continue giving rescue breaths as we were running out the door, and handed her off to the fire department personnel that arrived on the scene, and we escorted them to the hospital. And unfortunately, the baby did not make it. I've seen the blood, I've seen the guts out there, but this one is the one that got me. I still carry the prayer card in my pocket, because I actually went to the funeral as well. I think the reason why child and baby deaths affect officers so much is because so many of us are parents. So many of us are fathers, so many of us are mothers, and we see our own kids in some of these instances.
Does that make us weak if we personalize a scene and we have reactions and flashbacks? Tig, you were sharing something yesterday.
I've known Larry Rice for a long time. He's a great guy. He's a good officer. And when I watched that, when I was on the job, I did all the fatal accidents. And this sounds horrible, but I like taking a good wreck. I like the car part of it, and fatal accidents are never real nice things. But I don't remember anybody that I ever investigated in a fatal accident. But I was on the job about 4 months, and a guy had picked up his 1-year-old daughter by the face. I won't tell you the whole story, but he picked her up by the cheek with his nails, and he kicked her so hard in the back that it severed her intestines. And that night, I got the radio run. She was all distended, terrible thing to watch. She was born 1 week different than my oldest daughter. And I didn't think about that. I could tell you her name, I won't. But now, 40 years later, I can tell you that little girl's name, I know was April 1st, 1980. But I don't remember any other thing I ever did on a job of any consequence. So when I heard Larry say that, I mentioned it again. I says, you know, I never thought about this little girl until yesterday. So it's one of those things. So it does hang on a little bit.
Events can stay with you. Doesn't mean we're weak. This is the nature of a critical incident crisis reactions that normal people have after the event. And if you understand that, then you don't feel you're losing your mind or feeling vulnerable. Gruesome homicides, a violent or traumatic injury, being assaulted. We're going to go back to John again.
I worked in corrections, and I was 22 years old. I was assaulted by an inmate on the 2nd tier, and found myself almost being pushed over the top of the tier. And I remember feeling the feeling of almost a fight or flight, shock, can't believe this is happening. Does he have a knife? Does he not have a knife? Does he have a shank that I didn't find? And I remember thinking, what can I defend myself with, because I didn't have anything. All I had were keys in my hand. The entire rest of the pod was locked down, except for me and him. And I remember the pod screaming, and it was essentially like you were in a gladiator match, except you were the underdog. It finally ended because he tried to grab my radio, and some way I believe he was trying to grab my radio and rip it off so I wouldn't have any communication. And as we were fighting, I remember he grabbed it, and I was able to squeeze it and make some sort of scream or ruffle or something, and my coworkers were able to tell that something was not right in my unit. And I remember several minutes later, other deputies arriving into my unit and intervening in the fight. It was, I remember us being on the top tier of the unit, and I remember during the fight, he bent me over to the tier in an attempt to throw me off the tier. It's only 12 feet, but it looked like it was 50. I still have that memory in my mind. I remember my head. I had a headache and was numb and just kind of dazed and confused for the rest of the night. I remember for several days, I remember thinking about it and didn't have much of a worry. And then I remember coming back to work after several days off and went right back into the unit. And I struggled with, at a young age, you know, should I go back into this or what should I do? And I chose, I said, well, I'm going to go back into this because every one of those inmates in there is going to knows what happened. And to me, I think it felt like I made a statement that I think they were all surprised I actually came back.
So even though John had different kinds of reactions, he made a decision to go back there to show the courage that he's not going to let these people beat him and take him down. And we have two people who were there, you know, Officer Salisbury, John, we're going to talk about a little bit about that incident, compare the first one to the second one.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Just watching that video and thinking about that night. I was actually working that night. We were young. I don't even think we were off probation yet. But I remember, I was just thinking when we signed up, nobody ever talked about PTSD. Nobody ever talked about stress. Or there might be times in that future where we go toward that rabbit hole, you know, where we get depressed and have to deal with different things like that. So 2016, I believe it was 2016, we lost two of our officers to suicide. And a short time later, at a neighboring jurisdiction, we lost another officer. So we were devastated. At that time, we knew it was time to focus on mental health of officers. So the Sheriff Department did step up. We got a SISM team going now that has made a tremendous difference. It has helped. So I encourage, look at the Wayne State motto. It's good stuff. I've had several conversations with Dr. Ken Wolf, and it's good stuff. I encourage you to, you know, spread the word. Just remember, it's those invisible scars that go unnoticed. The invisible cuts go unnoticed. When we cut our arm or we have a wound, we bring immediate attention to that. We have to do the same thing with the invisible scars and wounds.
Do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I'll just say, so with my incident, I mean, we're talking about 18 and a half years ago. We didn't have any programs like Wayne State or the Frontline program here at all. There's never any debriefing about it all. Like I said, I mean, we were both on probation, brand new to the profession. We were kind of, and I said it in the video, I remember kind of thinking like, damn, do I want to come back to this? But I mean, at the same point in time, I said, you know, this is what I signed up for. I'm starting, this is, you know, the career I chose, and this is what I'm going to go forward with. But you know, I dealt with a lot of that trauma and stress from that incident myself, and I think it would have been really good at the time to have a program like this to be able to go to. So with that said, I mean, know it, understand it, make sure you share it with your other members. I think it's very valuable, and I think it could be really, really helpful.
Thank you. And I think the message is when they had the jail incident, nobody had their back. Nobody offered them crisis support. But now, and this is what we want you to hear and take back to your members and your peers, if an incident occurs, you got support, you got people, you know, doing your back. Domestic incidents, violence, And again, we're going back to Kim because she so poignantly describes some of the dispatcher stress.
They listen to tone, wording choices, background noises, especially if you have a domestic violence where small children are locked in the bathroom. What can you hear through that phone? The information that the children are able to give you, you have to almost turn everything else off in the room and only hyper-focus on what you can hear, that small piece of information. A particularly dramatic incident involved a domestic violence with small children. The oldest of the two children dialed 911. It was something that she had learned at school and had locked her and her brother in the bathroom. That her parents were having a physical argument in the house. You could hear it through the phone, that the anger coming through, and to be able to get information from her about what happened in the house and also convince her to put the younger child into the bathtub. Don't turn the taps on. Don't put the plug in the tub. Does he have toys to play with in the tub? Keep him occupied, almost to make her be able to focus on what we're asking, to basically get information from her to arrest somebody, to keep them safe. We're also trying to get information for the responding officers, weapons inside the home, anybody that's been drinking, intoxicants, narcotics, anybody else that might be in the house, older siblings, other adults. Those outside factors help the officer to keep them safe. That squashing of that fairy tale that this has happened to a child that quite possibly will not feel safe in their own home again, that they won't trust their parents, they won't trust their adults. They'll always be fearful that, dad will do this again, or mom will do this again, or if, mom or dad isn't there, that they're going to hurt me, they're going to hurt my brother, they're going to hurt my sister. That squashes any kind of sweetness and light that we need them to have. We need the children to feel safe, to always understand that you can call for help, dial 911, we're going to help you, but we want them to be safe, and sometimes helping them means destroying their family.
Think of that as a consequence. I want to protect the kids, but I may destroy their family. And I think when Tig and I were listening to that yesterday, the sensitivity, in the longer interview. By the way, we're going to make these interviews available for you, for your training, FTOs, and on the website. She talks about, I would ask the kids, does Daddy like to go hunting? Does Daddy do a lot of woodwork? They're trying to look at, do they have weapons? Do they drink? Do they have these problems? But they got to go down to the level of a 7-year-old to glean the information, so when you go out in your car and you get to that scene, you have some heads up as to potential dangers, suicides by cop, mass casualty events. I was with the Sheriff's Department during 9/11, and I worked with the EOC in Wayne County, and we would deploy both for them. We had a contract with the Army to assist at Ground Zero. And, obviously when you saw the people coming out, this is Father Judge, and he was doing last rites at people. Some people said he got killed when somebody jumped out of wood and fell on him. The actual truth is he got killed after he was doing last rites. He went inside, and then he had blunt trauma injury by debris falling. But imagine the mission of giving mercy, trying to save souls, and then getting killed in the process of a commitment to our fellow firefighters and peers. And then when people ran, and how do you look at that, the magnitude, contrast of scene? And if it's a scene we're not used to, that can be traumatic. And I'm going to talk about that with the jail. When we went on site, we took these pictures, by the way. This was 8 weeks. The core was still burning, and every time the wind shifted, the smell of decomposition would go all over southern Manhattan. And what these officers were looking for is anything that would be a badge, would be a credit card. Credit cards weren't destroyed, a finger or a bone. And then what they would do is they would put it in these buckets to do TNA. If they found a badge, what they would do is they would stop the excavation, they'd bring in the pipes, and we'd have an honor guard take out the remains of that first responder. And this was the 343 firefighters. The EOC was Building 7 at Ground Zero. When that went down, the city took over a pier, and everybody, FBI, EPA, fire, police, all set up tables. This was me, and I got yelled at by my OSHA because I wasn't wearing, a PPE, correct mask. And you think about firemen's lungs. There were 1,200 retirements because there was asbestos, mercury, all kinds of toxins there. What they would do is they take the remains of Ground Zero, they got to get it out, right? So they put it on these barges. Each barge held 100 tons. And then they would have these special trucks in Staten Island at a place called Fresh Kills. It's a Dutch word that means fresh water, but fresh kills, it sounds like, dead stuff. And then they would take all the remains and they would put it through sifters and sorters, because anything that they can do to give closure to a family was important. So these guys, and it was a crime scene, right? So these are all gold shields. You had to be a gold shield in order to work that scene there. They're looking for anything that looked like a ring, a badge, a finger that would give closure. And then you got to deal with the people, the sadness. And people go to the site because that was the place of death, of separation, of the last moments of their loved ones. And then we went into some of the firehouses where they did memorials there. And they took the Iwo Jima and then the flags there. This was at Katrina. And there was such total destruction. Think about what's going on right now. And the officers had tremendous dilemmas. They ran out of gas, they ran out of ammunition, there were looters, ran out of food. Do I stay home and protect my family, or do I go in and try and protect the community? This was 255. And when we had the crash, the sheriff said, we had a crash. I was at a wedding Sunday night. He says, you're the shrink for the department. Get out there and do something. Huh. So everywhere you see yellow is a body part. There were 156 people. There were only 5 visual IDs because the destruction and the burning was so intense. So this is a scene. Remember, it was in August, and the deputies were trying to do extrication, and the decomposition in the summer was very hot. Remember, we talk about contrast of scene? People were looting the crash site. So what happened was the sheriff locked down the jail, took 400 non-certified, put them out to do perimeter control. Well, they had never seen shootings, crashes, those kinds of things versus road patrol, ID, homicide. They had much more severe traumatic reactions, picking up body parts and trying to clean the scene up. At the awards ceremony, the union or the sheriff's department said, hey, Doc, we got a bunch of people who don't want to come. When we spoke to them, they didn't want to come because getting an award caused them to relive the scene. Reliving the scene was a trigger event, and they didn't want any part of it because they didn't process the slideshows, the horror. And then what happens is, what? First week in September, Labor Day, right? What do? You have barbecues, right? A lot of people had barbecues, and when they were cooking hamburgers and stuff, it made them think of the smell of burnt flesh. So it became very traumatic. So what we did was we prepared people with different handouts to say, these are some of the reactions you may have. These are the normal reactions that normal people have. And if you still have kinds of distress, please call us, because, we set up the crisis intervention program First deputy at the scene, you know, a plane crashed about 8:50 at night and it was raining. He goes to the scene on Middle Belt. What does he do? He starts directing traffic. He goes to his skill set to try and figure out what to do. This is the cockpit, okay? And again, you see all the yellow. And, you know, working in the scene for a long time, these were the ID guys. They wanted to see if the plane was shot down with a ground missile or with their explosives on the thing. And what they did was they took all the body parts that they had, put them in bags so they could do forensic IDs. They had 3,000 pounds of body flesh, and they put it in a non-denominational grave in Westland. And then people would come, where's my body? I want to have a funeral. And a lot of people, there were no bodies. Recovery from a critical incident, those line of duties, it's a series of stages. The first one, shock, disbelief, denial, numbness. That lasts a few minutes to a few hours. Then you go home in 2 or 3 days. Then you go through the impact stage, where you're safe. You start reliving the chase, the injury, the damage, the shooting. And now that you're safe, you start having cataclysms of emotion. Fear, anger, guilt, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Why didn't I do that? Maybe I could have prevented this from happening. Then sadness and alienation. Then the slideshows, the smells, you relive it. 1/3 of the people at a critical incident usually have no reaction. 1/3 have a mild reaction. 1/3 have a moderate reaction, and 2% are at risk of PTSD. By having the critical incident stress programs that we are implementing statewide with peers, we want to help people grow through the normal reactions that normal have. And you know, it's not like you flip a switch. You got to understand it's a process. You know, you got a sore, you take an antibiotic. You got an ache, you take an aspirin. Whatever you do, you don't do, you get better. Growing through a critical incident is not flipping a switch. You got to understand the actions and the emotions over time and know that these are normal. And the program that POAM is setting up, and we've been doing this with the Lifeline, but now we have the ability to do it statewide with good resources and treatment backup with Wayne. Viktor Frankl was a survivor of the concentration camps, and he's an existentialist philosopher. And he said, we are no longer, when we can't change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. What the crisis intervention does, it tries to help officers, dispatchers, family members reframe the event, understand that these are normal reactions. They're usually time limited, and you will get better. We set an expectancy of recovery. We're not talking about people who've been having, hallucinations for 25 years, but we're talking about an event that temporarily overwhelmed their ability to cope, and with time and support and peer support, they can get through it. I love this cartoon. It's Beetle Bailey. I know the print is like, he says, "What's wrong, Sarge?" And the Sarge is, hanging over the tree. "I need help, you idiot." So Beetle Bailey says, "I'll say he needs help." He says, "Now, tell me about your mother and your father." When we do crisis intervention, it's incident specific. What happened at the scene? What were your reactions? What were your reactions that day, the next few days, and the next week? And then you educate people as to these are normal reactions after line of duty critical incidents. So the goal is to reduce the impact, facilitate a recovery process, predict and prepare. You tell people what they're going to experience in emotions and physiological reactions over the next few days. Then when they have it, they don't feel they're losing their mind. They say, well, the doc said it's going to happen. I guess I'm right on schedule. That's what the beauty of this process is. That's what the beauty of the peer support we're going to be making available to departments statewide. And we're going to help people develop a coping plan. And for those people who are particularly distressed, what we're going to do is refer them to ongoing resources. After a critical incident, you get overwhelmed, you try and figure it out. One, you get stuck. You never want to go back to work. You never want to leave your house because you're a fear of a repetition. You can't go back. You lost your confidence. We don't want that to happen. We don't want people to lose careers that they love. You go back to where you were, or you go back to a higher sense of meaning, because your meaning changes. You now, by confronting death and pain in the way in which you does, changes your sense of priorities. And you say, you know, if I were killed, if I were dead, what would have been important to me? Well, I like my family. I wanted to go up north, wanted to go boating. People, when they confront their mortality, suddenly realize, with the time I have left, this is what I want to do. Because we learn that tomorrow is promised to no one, and the most precious gift we have is the gift of time. And time and who we love is more important than the job, even if you love the job. And then you say, what did I learn, and how can I expand my life to feel good? The program that we're talking about is joint, it's confidential, it's non-investigatory, it's not IA. What did you do at the scene? We're here to look at your reactions to what happened at that scene, to help people grow through it and keep them functional and keep their careers. It's coordinated with mental health clinicians, chaplains, and peers. And the crisis teams we're going to be training are permanent organizations for a temporary task. When there's a critical incident, then they get mobilized to help you, your peers, and family members. And we're going to help design joint SOPs and guidelines, which you will then negotiate with your departments. We're going to define roles of command supervisors, union reps. What is the mental health support in your area? If there's an absence of mental health, we're going to try and use, you know, the docs at Wayne, or we're going to identify vetted treatment networks and providers throughout the state. And confidentiality is going to be a core element, because if you don't feel you can, I always tell people, don't lie to your shrink, don't lie to your lawyer, and don't lie to your priest. Because if you do that, you're not going to get the help you need. So at some point, you got to take a risk. By training peers, because you're going to trust your peers before you're going to trust command to some shrink you don't know, you may take that risk to salvage your family, to salvage your career. And who do we debrief? Officers, dispatchers, correction command, firefighters, EMTs, PIAs, FTOs, civilian personnel, and specialty units. Like in Wayne County, with the Sheriff's Department, we had SWAT, we had AERO, we had dive teams, you know, we had ID staff, K-9, the EOC, mutual aid, and then the team itself. There are best practices that have been going on for many years. This grant gives us the resources to implement it in a comprehensive way for you, your buddy, your peers, and your family members. So we want you to understand what's now available and then go do it. So the action plan is set up a peer team, have us come out to your department, and then let us share with you how we can set this stuff up. Abraham Lincoln said the best deed in the world after creating a human life is saving a human life. Isn't that why you made this commitment for community service? You wanted to make a difference to your neighbors, to your friends, to your community. Albert Einstein said, the world can be an evil place, not because of the evil that men do, but because of those that allow them to do it. You are that line in the sand. You confront evil with skills, training, resources, and backup. Because if you don't do it, who is going to do it? There's an analogy Lieutenant Grossman talks about: the wolves, the sheepdog, and the sheep. And there are wolves that prey upon the sheep. And the sheep sort of just, you know, meander around, bah. The sheepdog is you. You are the protectors. And when the wolves come to town, you confront the wolves. And sometimes the sheep don't like you, right? You stop them, they're speeding, they're drunk. When Columbine happened, those kids ran out to the officers who were trying to stop McVeigh, you know, from doing, not McVeigh, but Harris and Klebold. You know, there's a code of chivalry. Think about it. You know, the knights, King Arthur, and all that stuff. And what does a knight do? You are all knights. They go through the kingdom and they have a shield, right? And on the shield, you know, the different insignias. And the insignia is usually the lord of that kingdom, that fiefdom. And that gave the knight the legitimacy to go forth and defend the community. And you know what? All of you have shields, don't you? We got badges. Sheriffs, corrections, U.S. Marshals, firefighters. This gives us the legitimacy to do our roles in the community. I love this cartoon. Chief comes, the priest comes out, we got a jumper, right? Priest is a compassionate guy, just like many of you are very compassionate. He listens to the problems and the overwhelming suffering, and then after hearing all that, he jumps off the building. That's that compassion fatigue. That's that vicarious traumatization. We don't want that to happen to you. We want you to recognize it in yourself and call us. We want you to recognize it in your peers and take referrals so the program, the job doesn't burn you out, but we want to help you replenish it in those low frequency times when you feel vulnerable. Remember, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. Preparedness, knowing the resources, seeing a critical incident, knowing who to call, requesting POAM, the lifeline, Wayne, to give you the resources to manage it, is going to save lives and careers. And that's what we're all about. We're a SWAT team, we're a cross-functional, team to help save your careers when these emotional kinds of events happen. Thank you very much for your time and attention.